session on geopolitics. We are talking about two assumptions. There are some countries that Donald Trump and the Western power thinks that they are not supposed to be a democratic country because over the years they have proven not to be able to rule their people. And the second assessment is about the current polling in the US, where Democrats are described as historically unpopular and financially strained, heading into a midterm cycle come November 2026, while cultural products lose audiences. Yet, survey continue to project democratic strength. The speaker asks whether the disconnect render the polls complete horses. This statement invite us to test assumption about legitimacy, the limits of external pressure or engagement, the reliability of opinion, data versus market and behavior signals, and the relation between cultural trends and electoral outcome. We have outlined 10 questions to our guests. This program signifying life for their people. And why is that acknowledgement framed as a prerequisite for any rehabilitation?
Okay, it's an interesting question that you. We're looking at geopolitics, and if you look at how the world functions, there are some countries that are considered authoritarian countries, and so they don't give liberty to their citizens. Some of them we have met. A good example, you 80% to 90% are obligated to follow but Islam and so on. Apart from that, you can't speak the way you speak in America, where you can easily tell the president to go fuck himself. Sorry for using the F word, but then and you will not be arrested or. And so, looking at these countries, we see a contrast between the two worlds. One world, you can just get up and say whatever you want to say. We can't really guarantee whether your freedom thereafter is free, but then there's that liberty for you to express your mind. But in another world, you see a kind of censorship, either self-censorship or censorship by the government. That's the case of countries like Iran, countries like North Korea, Cuba, and many others, where the citizens are basically living as if they're in a lion's den, where the lions decide whatever happens.
Ancient civilization.
Yes, the case where the kings and emperors were ruling and they had the final say. And so, when we look at these countries, there is a tendency for us to conclude that the way people are living there is not meeting the standard because if you see the government doing something and you criticize the government, which is the government that we are supposed to live by the principle of democracy, they govern are answerable to following the contract principle that if I'm your president, I'm a servant to serve us, not serving themselves. So these countries tend to seem as if they are kings and emperors. And so many of their citizens end up being locked up in prisons when they speak up. Some of them are even executed without any see. We see countries that people live below standard and nobody can complain. We see countries that people basically want to survive, and so they're locked up. And so that is the argument that we're saying that we can say to an extent that their citizens are not living as the rest of the world. And so that is the point that we're making this argument.
Right. I want to find out the country does not only have political structure, it equally have other pillars of the economy, that is including economic life, cultural life, aside human rights. So the question I want to find out, what measuring instrument has been used by the West to compare these four regimes and know that they are not fit to govern a people?
Well, I think first we want to look at each country, those economic, social, political, maybe cultural. Now let's look at them in terms of political. Let's keep political first. Political can be obvious, we already know. Let's take the economic aspect.
North Korea.
Yes, North Korea. If you look at North Korea, and if we have, it's a locked country, so we don't really have an in-depth knowledge of what happens. But the few videos and the few reporting you see shows that the people are barely living at the mercy of the
Propagandist media.
you may want to say there's propaganda, but then if it was a transparent and open country, then we might not be able to have that argument that it is not that the people are living. Because we often see, take the case of Iran, just the starting of now justify that what the CNN that is being a propaganda. Me, understand how CNN can also be. We see, having been following politics since 2016, we see a lot of propaganda from the Western media. But we're now living in a new generation where it's difficult to hide. Even in North Korea, how we just mentioned, there are people get images out, and so you see a lot of execution because they are trying to express their human right. Now, rehabilitating is a good idea, but take the case of, I'm looking at Cuba, for an example. Let's take a Cuba. If you look at Cuba or Venezuela, which is another country that was also, especially this country that are socialists, they tend to seemingly, socialism says is for everybody, but you never really find that everybody benefits from it. If you look at Cuba, and you see what is happening today, it is the Western desire to change this to be pro-Western values and principles. And so we see that even the war in Iraq, in Iran, as is currently being fight. I think when Donald Trump went to Iran, to Venezuela, and used his approach, he discovered that he could easily turn Venezuela to be a little bit pro-West and instead Western value, work with them so that they should progress. So that mindset of maybe you approach, and how do I come to that conclusion? If you look at what they have done, the first memorandum of understanding that America had with Iran was a kind of good behavior will be rewarded. That was the principle of the memorandum. Said, okay, if you become friendly to the West, if you stop bombing Israel and stop sponsoring terrorism in the Middle East and maybe other parts of the world, then we'll froze your assets, you'll join the world economy. And so that was a process. For me, many people criticize that, but I saw that was a kind of rehabilitation plan that the Western government, especially Donald Trump's regime or America, was trying to implement.
We are talking about a country that has been under embargo since 1979, and since then has been coping with itself. Initially, the US and Western power said they wanted to put a halt on their nuclear weapon industrialization. And of recent, the vice president of the US, this Vance, came out and said that the war, as of now, has turned now struggle to maintain the level of gas production, though they want the the Asian country, including the Middle East country, to lost control of their gas production. So the war now is a war oriented towards gas, and this statement cannot be withdrawn. They jumped down that the UN position itself to be giving instruction, giving counts, and who has to, whose civilization is acceptable on the table or not. And the relation of that struggle, nuclear weapons management now. We switch from security to economy.
I think if you, uh, I always learn that giving a simple answer to a complex problem is always wrong. If you want to boil down the current, I'll use the word quagmire in Iran and the standoff between the US and Iran to economic. Economic is playing a central role because militarily, Iran cannot withstand, which we can also discuss these things. Iran has gone through a lot since for the 47 years. But I always argue that one of the things that Iran did, Iran had an agenda. All the past almost seven presidents saw it, but nobody acted against it. Either they were afraid of the consequences, which is what Donald Trump is currently suffering from. What happened is that Iran has an ideology, and that's why it's difficult to overcome their desire to control the world. And the ideology is simple. They want to be let me use the word hegemon as a Middle East concern. They want to control and if possible beyond the Middle East. And so how did they operate? Basically, they were building a lot of building their military, missiles, and all sorts of ammunitions, and we can see what they're doing. And the idea was that if we have enough production, if we can arm ourselves enough to an extent that no country can easily fight us without bearing a lot of loss, then we can determine what happens in the Middle East and beyond. And so George Bush saw it, Obama saw it, even Jimmy Carter, I think, saw it. Trump, in his first term, saw it, tried to do something but couldn't.
That takes me to
Yes.
1931, the Nazis movement that was.
Yes.
So you said the seven previous president of the U.S. saw the Iranian hegemony on construction, but remained silent. Just as in Western Europe in 1931 before, they saw the struggle of the communists trying to take over with the USSR from Russia, and they sat quiet until they saw a stoosh, because for them, Hitler was a stoosh they could use and manipulate. Are you saying parallel analysis that Western civilization equally saw Donald Trump as a stoosh to manipulate and allowed him now to come?
Now let's before we the Hitler government could have been prevented. Now, again, let's also make something, let's understand something. There's always intended consequences on unintended consequences. Now, if you look at what is happening in what happened in the 1940s, it started growing and growing. People like Stanley early, I think they came up and so Hitler was not really a direct response. Hitler was an ideologue. So he basically wanted Germany to become a powerful nation
Just
to
like
control the
Donald
world.
Trump today.
Yes.
But now in Donald Trump, I don't know what also about
the issue.
because
No, the issue is that the past 7 presidents. Let's try to conclude to give the past 7 presidents. They saw it that Iran was a threat, but they were afraid because of their political capital. But Donald Trump came in and he's using his political capital to do a correction. Now, some people have argued that Iran just wants to be to be independent, like North Korea, because you look at North Korea to have nuclear weapons, and so nobody can just harass North Korea. But there are two things to underscore, or there is something here. What North Korea is not trying to conquer the world. North Korea is not trying to take over South Korea, take over Guam and all the other parts of the world that they have a possibility. But that's not the same ideology that the Islamic Republic has. The Islamic Republic, using their share principle and their law, or the jihadist kind of ideology, feels that for us to exist, everybody should either become a Muslim or follow their religious practices. And so they have a kind of utopic world that they want to live in. And if we want to compare the two situations, the 1945 Wahala and the US, that's not correct to get. Wait, let's, before we get back there. So I've tried to analyze the situation and say, okay, maybe Iran just wants to be like North Korea, where they are not threatened, because it seems like when you have a nuclear weapon, you are relatively safe. But then that is not what is happening, because Iran has been actively sponsoring terrorist groups in the Middle East. We have Hamas, sponsored by Iran. We have the Houthis. We have the Hezbollah and so many others. So they are not the same, and we cannot treat them the same and say, no, this is just somebody who wants to be free, who wants to have independence from the Western pressure, which always comes.
Religious say they are behind the Sharia.
Yes, and I think religion plays a major role in the ideology. That's why they can even die.
Your analysis seems very biased. I understand why.
No.
Say, what is the Iran next move? And so, it seems it's the US that is winning the struggle. But I have 4 hypotheses for that. I might take it subsequently, but I have some few questions here I must run through.
Yes.
Before, historically, have any authoritarian or theocratic regime undergone meaningful internal reform or rehabilitation without first publicly admitting systemic failure? What lesson, if any, do these cases offer to us?
I think if you look at from a historical stand, from the onset of nations, we can go back to, I think, the Westphalian Treaty, where nations became. When a country comes out and say that we are running a socialist approach and we want to be pro-communism or kind of, we don't have instances where they will somehow, by the from socialism, even though it's very destructive. The issue is that what socialism actually does is that it creates a class system where we have they live large at the expense of everybody. And so when those at the top start eating, you look at the animal farm, those at the top, once they're happy, they think. And so that is how socialism. So these people now, it becomes very difficult for them to make a change. So you will not want to see Iran will hardly change its ideology from internal reaction. No Venezuela, no Cuba, no North Korea. Only an external force can change. And that's the same thing that happened with the USSR. There needed to be pressure that led to the disintegration of the whole country, or the whole, I don't know whether we will call it country, to confederation, that's the right word, to smaller states that we have now, like Ukraine is a fallout, and so many Serbia and the rest. So I don't think that we can say that there is a country that from within will get up and say, no, let's move away from socialism and embrace democracy.
Right. So to you, there are historically
I don't have, maybe they could
authoritarian
be.
system that have come up
Yes.
and openly denounce failure of management and so request for rehabilitation.
Exactly.
Now, what concrete metrics, GDP per capita, life expectancy, freedom indices, immigration rates, best measure whether a regime has failed to achieve a dignified life, and how do the cited regime currently score on those metrics relatively to peers? If we are reporting live from Africa, so when we talk of GDP per capita, life expectancy, freedom, there are so many African countries would have been under the list, even though
I think
they have signed democratic treaties.
I think it's a good question, and it's a cause for concern that we are living in Africa. You have mentioned the issue of immigration. You've mentioned per capita GDP and human rights and many others. If you limit life expectancy, if we limit ourselves to these four aspects, let's look at GDP. Most of these countries have the lowest GDPs. You can.
That's not very true.
Most of them.
Iran, people live well in Iran than in most African countries.
Yes, that's why I'm saying that most of these countries, which means African countries, should normally be in the list, because how many African countries truly practice democracy? Now, we may also debate the concept of democracy, because for me, I don't even consider America a democratic country.
So the question actually is, we are putting these countries at the margin, saying that their authoritarian system does not guarantee an easy lifestyle for their citizens.
Since we're discussing geopolitics, I want us to look at something again from a wider dimension. Now, look at the world as a piece of cake. So everybody wants to have a share in that piece of cake. We have those who think that I should have the largest share and decide whatever happens to the remaining part. And so, what am I saying? The world has, we have the US or the Western world that they think that they can police the world, led by the US, and decide what happens as values and principles. On the other hand, we have China. China's ideology is not really to police the world, but they want to police the world in not the way the US is doing, through economic power.
Is to occupy the space US and Russia policing and creating.
No, it's not really about, yes, it's that's why we say, if you look at it as a cake, everybody's struggling to occupy. And if you look at it also from that dimension, you understand Donald Trump's foreign policy. What happens is that when America has been enjoying the hegemony role, making the world a unipolar system for too long. But for the last 20 years, it made a lot of mistakes, starting with accepting China to join the World Trade Organization. And that helped China to open up its economy. And because of the trade advantage, the economy of China grew very fast. And China now currently is a threat to that monopoly or hegemony role of the US. So many past presidents have thought of confronting it again, but only Donald Trump came out and said, well, should I allow China to control the world production? For instance, during COVID, it was difficult to get basic needs in America. Everything is done from China, and China was completely locked down. So that became a whole threat. America and the world in general. And so Donald Trump comes in and says, okay, America. First, I will need to box China into one end. How can I box China into one end? This is geopolitics now in real play. First, one of the things that controls the world is oil. And so China gets most of the oil from this so-called socialist country. We have Venezuela, we have Iran, or countries that are not friendly to the West. And so the first approach that Trump had to do was to say, okay, I'll attack Venezuela, right, and make it pro-West. In that case, I can control what the whole world system runs, which is oil. That was successful for Venezuela. He looked the next place where there is a lot of oil and have a lot of influence was we have Iran. And so when you look at Iran, Iran is not only because they're trying to get nuclear weapon, which we have already established that that is one of the ideologies. But the second thing is that Iran also produces a lot of oil. So Trump's ideology was, if I take out the leadership, maybe they could easily fall and become pro-West. In which case now, I will maintain global dominance as oil is concerned, and dollar value will remain strong, and I can influence a lot of what happens across the globe. That was his ideology.
We've been 25 minutes into this discussion. You will permit me to take you to the second part. We initially introduced the conversation around two major goals. The first one regarding these four emerging countries who are seeking validation in the table of democratic practices. And the second one that
I don't even think that they want to be validated.
yes,
It's the Western world that says that they're not valid, and we should make them
okay,
valid.
good. So the second aspect has to do with democratic practices. Actors in the US, we were just talking about of measuring countries that are relatively free. You might want to think that Africa isn't far from these countries that the West want to dictate their policies to. So, telling the second statement, what data sources document that Democrats are the least popular they have ever been now, as far as U.S. civilization is concerned, and never been so broke, heading into a midterm cycle, and how do those figures compare with previous cycles?
Okay, I think when we look at this is American politics in particular right now. One of the things we see is that America has only two political parties. We have the Republican Party and the Democrat Party. And what happens is that if you look at the whole practices, what we have observed is that over the years, the ruling party often loses during the midterms. And that has been like that for the past 50 years. But then the current situation seems funny because the Democratic Party or the Democrat Party, who are outsiders trying to take power, have a very low approval rate. I think they are in their 20s, and that's the lowest it has been from one poll to another. Their policies are rejected, and we even witness something that is coming out from their system, which is now, we call it the socialist part arm of the Democratic Party. And so there is a socialism that is also coming in America, which the America is struggling to fight in other parts of the world. But then, do we think that the Democrats will win the midterms election to take over the House and the Senate? And we are thinking that there are things we must consider. First, if they will be able to win, then the Iran war has to play a major role. Firstly, what is happening is that the oil prices have been very high, Iran war, and so making Trump to be very unpopular. The second factor that we need to play in order for them to win is that if they don't elect or during they're running their primaries now and they're taking a lot of extreme ideologies, those who are sharing we call it the socialist views. And we think that the socialist view may work well for local elections, they might not be able to take them across the bar because they become unpopular and not many Americans want to turn into socialism. Although we see the youths who are complaining that we are unable to afford basic needs, we cannot buy home, getting a home. See, one thing that is very, very important to tell us how the Democratic Party is, that they're currently minus as money is concerned. I think they are owe around I don't know, it's 2 million. Yes, after burning 2 billion in the previous election, which they lost. And the Republican Party is going in much favored in terms of resources. They have close to 400 something million in their coffers. So if we go by the fact that elections are influenced by money, then there's high probability. So there's high probability that the Republican will maintain, especially the Senate. They may lose the Congress or the lower house, but they will maintain the Senate. There's high probability. This always pivot or to happens with external policy and economics. And the current economic situation in America is not the best. Trump has not delivered. And there is always this concept which says that is the economy stupid.
Trump was voted by two major powers.
Yes.
One were the Make America Great Again.
Yeah.
That had to fight against immigration, against the tax policies. On that note, most of Trump followers are very positive. They not action. Great. The only problem with them is that they are not ready to see part of their money being wasted fighting a war that is in so many kilometers. They never really predicted that. Then the second group,
yes,
before you take the floor, are the Christian traditionalists who wanted to limit the expansion of same-sex and other. I mean, again and again, they also are okay, but of the you don't see these two indicators.
There are two things that we should take note of when it comes to politics and it comes to winning elections. Economy. Thank you. Feminism is not, I don't really want to put it like feminism, but just saying there is no wood. We can't define a woman before. Yes, women playing, men playing in women's sports, men present in women's locker rooms and things like that. For that, he has done well. The second thing is immigration. Most Americans want immigration, but they want legal immigration. They think that coming in should be something that you should be vetted to see if you like the country, you share the values and principles. Except that those are the same things that the Democratic Party or the Democrat Party wants. They don't care whether where you come from, you can come in whether you're a criminal or not. Struggle, some are the ideology you can freely worship. There is no censorship. It was during the Biden administration. You have the tendency before you go to America now, you are vetted to an extent. There is no illegal immigration as before. But one thing that always defines people's action is their stomach. People feel that Trump has not done well in economy, given his global tariffs principle, which has caused a lot of prices to go.
China has taken advantage of, because that's what I was trying to explain before. Trump is losing on four different diagonal never part of his agenda. You know, at the level of his tax policy, when he created the high tax policy, he thought that other countries were just going to submit to him forgetting that China was there just like a smuggler. As you follow up yourself, and the people are looking for it. It's mostly happened in the Middle East countries. As soon as the policies of Trump went up and they were retracting themselves, China immediately came in and became the next job that were previously for American and gone.
Let me a short on it. And many Americans have not evaluated why is our government so indebted of the previous policies. I think if there is one thing Trump has awareness of the current realities of American economy. There is nobody consumes more than he or she produces and survive long term. America has lived for so long on services. They ignore production, they transcend. Within the importing a lot and had the dollar to one lost its value. Depend on foreign countries for home products and to bring back production into country is to make cheaper.
We know
To explain operating that for me to influence to make America strong again or great again is to bring back production through one of the ways is taxation. Now, has it created a gap in the global? Yes, it has created. But I also want to say something apart from the policies, there is something that the whole world and even America needs to come to realization. Before now, the AI is one of the highest things that have caused a change. And Americans think that they can continue to enjoy what they've enjoyed before. No. Before now, America influenced world politics. Only CNN, we only listen to CNN, we have social media
and
now.
that takes me to
We
the
have
next
AI.
question about
Yes.
the declining mainstream media audiences. How should one weigh observable signals of woke films, donor reports against published polling that shows democratic strength? What are the strongest methodological critics of each type of evidence?
Okay. Like I was saying, I think the question leads directly to what I was trying to explain. If we look keenly into how the world functions 10 years or 20 years before now, we know that what we knew that was right was coming from CNN, SMBC, and the rest. And so they had control. So they could tell you what is false. We are now seeing what Fauci did during COVID because of social media. And that censorship, let me use the word censorship of information, gave America a lot of power. Now, another thing that's happened is the coming of AI. AI has decentralized knowledge. The same concepts and principle Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and used to group Microsoft and all the other companies to group China. That knowledge is available across the world. And so America cannot continue to think that they will live as before. They must come to a realization that knowledge is not limited. Information now is available. You cannot hide. You try to do something, somebody shares it online, and everybody becomes aware. And so social media has given a lot of power even to a common man. In Cameroon, you don't necessarily need CRTV to know what is happening in the country. No, do you need what? BBC to know what is happening across the world. And so there is a dynamics that is taking place that all countries, recruiting even African countries, are coming to a realization that we can build our own system and we can equally stand on our own on so many aspects without necessarily depending on the West.
That's right. If commercial failure of certain media and cultural product is real, does that necessarily imply corresponding electoral weakness for Democratic Party, or can the two diverge? What mechanism might link the group there?
Okay, I think that we are talking two things here: commercial failure or the social media or of the mainstream media. I think Trump created the word fake news, and so whatever the mainstream media report is that even all parties now are currently using all these platforms. They're on X, they're on Twitter, they're on TikTok trying to sell their ideology. So they still have the possibility to lead to meet their voters. And so what I said is that they need money to be able to get there. If they can have the money, they will be fine. And the second thing is that if Trump keeps performing poorly, also the quality of candidates that they are going to will influence their success or failure, because beyond all, the candidates should not have baggage or that will send people away. If we have more moderate Democrats, then they are highly likely to win and the House. But if we have extremists, they may sell at the local level.
Elite narrative and grassroots economic
A good
or cultural indicators, and how did those gaps resolve?
example will be 2024 presidential election in America.
Okay.
If you look at the election in America, most polls were projecting that Kamala will win,
Yeah.
and want to see that Donald Trump, who we don't consider gone out of the political scene, became president for the second time. And so most pollsters were surprised. I think there is this
So you were
element.
not surprised.
I was surprised for a good number of reasons. First, I was very optimistic, knowing that having come right to where I saw that Kamala, she was not very
She can speak
electable.
for herself.
Yes, which
I
was
think that she's weak.
yeah, I think that she was weak. If the Democratic Party did well to select somebody who was also who could represent, who could speak, then I think they would have. But
She refused
much
to
more.
answer the question whether Biden actually supported her. She never wanted to answer that question.
Yeah, there is what we call the danger of being in power and running for power, and that's the same thing that JD Vance or whoever will take over Trump.
Say you want to.
Yeah, that's he will need to campaign for himself and against Trump. And that becomes very difficult because they will say, okay, you promise us no war.
Biden did
And you, and also against. But if Vance is going in, it means I've been the administrator. I'm currently still Trump went to Iran, which is a bad idea. Although history will have Trump on good books. What he's doing is unpopular at the moment, but will record him as having taken a good decision.
Unfortunately, the current stance of the and get your point of view who is actually on the increasing part of the graph. But this is two questions to go. To what extent do selection effects, non-response bias, or partisan differences in survey population distort national and state level political polls? And how can those distortions be qualified or corrected?
Yeah, having been since I'm a data scientist, I understand how some of those data are collected. There is what we often say observation bias and also confirmation bias. There's a tendency that if you're a Democrat, you want to go get more Democrats to justify your ideology and come to the public and say that we are winning. But that is not always the truth. Also, at the same time, some voters do not tell you exactly what they will do. And that tends to always make our prediction of elections not very accurate. If you want to be accurate from a statistical perspective, the person giving you responses must be honest. And so if there is no honesty, whatever statistical principles you run may not. And
How do you
again,
measure honesty, please?
no, honesty, we can't measure honesty, but we always say that the participant or the person responding to the question should be honest. If you will vote for a Republican, don't tell us that you will vote for a Democrat. If you will not vote, don't tell us that you will vote when you won't. So when you are not intending to and you tell us otherwise, then at the end of the day, you are dishonest and with best analysis, because with analysis, data speaks. So if there are biases in the data collection or in the responses or whatever way, then no matter how we try to clean it, it's difficult for us to be accurate.
And that takes us to our last question. If the polling picture is indeed complete horses, what alternative forecasting methods or data stream, early voting, registration trends, small donor pattern, consumer sentiment, betting markets will provide a more reliable picture of midterm prospects? And how should those be weighted relative to traditional polls?
Okay, that is very interesting question. And I think that if you are working for a political party and to know the true state of what is happening, gaming, polling markets, and others are available. Donations, especially the donations, are very, very good indicators of people's sentiment.
Some people say
And
that's what
also,
made Trump to win last year. Thanks to Elon's donation.
I think Elon's donation was quite which
Okay.
yes, and he played
It's
a
an
key role.
outlier.
Yes, it was an outlier, spending close to 350 million. Seems to be the highest ever spent by a single party or person on a campaign. What happens is that at the end of the day, as a geostrategist and discussing these issues, what I take from the discussion thus far is that if you look at the global landscape, America will continue to police the world for some time. And
So we are part of those who are seeing the fall of the Western civilization.
no, no,
It's a mirage.
it's a mirage. If we there are so many factors that
Dollar
interplay.
values dropping to petroleum interest, and the Middle East countries have not given up. Israel is moving their support behind the US. Finally, US finds himself in the middle of a war. Neither the Republican two-pillar support are with the leadership, nor the historical support coming from the Middle East, that was Israel. At the end of the day, you are not seeing the fall of the Western civilization.
No, that will be giving again a quick solution to a very complex issue.
That
Now,
coming up for this for the fifth
yes,
time now.
yes. When it comes to geopolitics, there are so many moving parts. When people say there is no support between America and Israel, I think that
dropping.
It's
The last statement, and that's why I said we cannot contain that within this live edition, but we shall be coming back
yes.
to talk about it.
But then, before we go, I want to say this. America's supremacy remains undisputed for the next 20 years. But thereafter, I doubt. Because maybe 20 years might be long, given the availability, the advent of AI. Now, America has enjoyed hegemony for close to 70 years, but that is drifting away, either by its own policies or other external factors. The rise of China, the weakening of Europe. Europe is nowhere to be found in global affairs when it comes to geopolitics. We have a lot of population, but I think that the relationship with the US is also somehow not very stable. But then America still controls a lot of what happens in the world in terms of technology, in terms of influence, in terms of ideology, in terms of perspective they're still driving. However, we need to watch out for what AI and other technologies are doing, because if production becomes decentralized, knowledge, media becomes decentralized, America will lose one of what it used to control the world. And so their primacy will be.
End of this elder edition, this maiden edition of Global Geopolitics, hitting right from Cameroon, Central Africa. Mr. Ferdinand, you were our guest, permanent guest for that matter. I want to thank you for making this edition possible.
Thank you very much, and I hope that our viewers would have learned something, and we call upon them to subscribe so that anytime we are live, they will join us, because we'll be discussing
on the current Tehran-Washington conflict, and we said that would be. So, what are you promising to viewers for the next?
I think in our upcoming we'll discuss the stalemate, the quagmire between Iran and the US. We'll also look at the Israel-American relationship, which is very important, and we will look at the Europe-American relationship, and then maybe China. Those are geopolitical issues that we need to be discussing. They're very, very vital, and they affect our life right here in Cameroon. So that is where we're going next.
That makes sense for this edition. It's been Cyril, I'll be yours again. Until then, take care of yourself.